happening, friends? It's about to happen. All right. There we are. Howdy, howdy, everybody. Welcome to a little, this is my inaugural YouTube live session. Welcome to a live Ask Me Anything Banjo session. I have to change one thing here because it's not going to work out. Hold on one sec. We'll have to adjust that. Alright. Okay. Had some audio issues already. That is my style. I think we're good now. So, live Ask Me Anything. You can ask in the chat here on the YouTube. You can also, if you got here from the Facebook group, you may have left a chat question there. If so, we'll get to it. Otherwise, we will get started, I reckon. I'm going to start off with a couple questions I already got earlier, and some of these are pretty common ones, but I'll start out there, and then if anybody has any live questions, let me know. Banjo questions answered to order. This is part of a recent rash of live broadcasts by yours truly, but most of those have been going on the Play Better Banjo Facebook page, and then on the private Better Banjo Way Facebook group. But now we're going to start hitting the YouTube live, and then starting in a week or so, we're doing three weekly live sessions and one extra monthly live session going all out for the next year or more. That's all going to be part of the Better Banjo Way full experience, and we got a link for that in the description, I think, underneath this feed. So I'll talk about that a little more in a minute, but let's get to some questions. And if we don't have any live ones just yet, I'll start with the first one I have queued up here, and that is I used to get this question all the time. I don't get it so much anymore, but I did get it twice in the last couple months via email, and that is, why should I learn scales? And that's a pretty darn good question, and my first answer is you don't necessarily need to learn scales. Traditionally, and just like formal Western musical learning, that's usually a pretty standard way to just kind of get acquainted with an instrument. And especially in the old days, you know, if you learned at school or from a music teacher at a music store or something like that, usually break out a little book, learn a few notes on the staff, and then learn how to play the major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Right? And so why do we do that? Well, it's not a bad thing to do. Like I said, you don't have to do it in order to achieve your musical goals, depending on what your goals are. But the reason I think that was always such a big way to learn is because there's a lot built into learning a scale, whether it be a major scale or some other scale form. You're going to learn, it's going to teach you, especially in the beginning, all the necessary coordination you need. Let me get this out of your way for a sec. So, for instance, you need to be coordinating your right and left hands in whatever fashion you need to do your execute your passages, right? So practicing scales is just kind of a good place to start getting the strength and the dexterity going, getting the coordination between the two hands, and building up those muscles, both mental and physical, that you need in order to start gaining more facility on your instrument. So in that sense, that's one reason you could learn scales. I like scales. There's a lot you can do with them, but I'm definitely not one of those people who think you have to know all about them and how they're constructed and why they're there and how to use them to compose or improvise. I love all that information. I love sharing it with folks, and I do think it's very helpful. But when you get down to it, if I'm teaching somebody banjo from scratch, we don't talk about scales for quite a while. Um, we just get them playing, and then we get them playing a basic tune or two, put all the basic foundational techniques together, and usually in about 3 or 4 lessons, we're playing a slow banjofied version of something like "You Are My Sunshine" or something like that. And then later, if you start looking at scales, if you learn in that manner, you'll start to notice, oh yeah, I already know where all those notes are grouped together there because I'm used to playing, uh, X tune in that key. So I'm kind of going all around the question, but I would say, there's a lot of reasons that scales could be helpful. Now, when you get around to the point where you want to improvise in any manner, so I'm usually teaching clawhammer tunes, right? And usually the main focus there, excuse me, the main focus for most folks in the clawhammer world is they want to play fiddle tunes. Maybe they want to accompany themselves on some folky songs. And so a lot of people think you don't improvise if you're playing along with a fiddle tune because you just play that melody, or you play your little banjo version of that melody and you play it over and over and over, and you don't need to improvise. But that's really not true. All musicians are pretty much improvising in the moment to some degree. And a really good banjo player, old-time clawhammer player, following a fiddler, will still have a lot of improvised ideas in their playing. That's what will make it interesting, give you some unexpected moments, and keep the listener interested. Because your first step might be to learn a little arrangement of a tune on the banjo, but then once you play it over and over and over, you, and especially the listener, they're going to, and even the people you're playing with, they're going to want to hear some variation in there. So just creating variations and embellishments on a fiddle tune, for instance, would be improvisation. So in that sense, a good tool for improvisation can be to know some scales. So there's a lot of reasons to learn scales. And again, it's really up to you. If we were training together one-on-one, if I was coaching you personally, scales would come up eventually. It definitely wouldn't be right on the forefront. And when they do come up, when I start to introduce them, I usually don't even call them scales. After people know a few tunes, I usually start talking about safe notes. So if I've learned Old Joe Clark, and I've learned Buffalo Gals, and I've learned some of the old classic open G tunes that the clawhammer players learned in my day, if I learn those in the open G tuning, I kind of get used to knowing where certain notes are and how they're grouped. And then once I learn, if I start calling those safe notes, I can use those for certain effects and certain benefits. And then later, when I start looking at scales, I realize, oh, those safe notes are really just notes of probably a pentatonic scale, maybe some major scale notes. All right, so that's plenty to talk about there on learning scales, and hopefully that's helpful. If somebody needs a follow-up question about that, that'd be great. I think we have a question, though, here. Let's see. There it is. Kelly's here with us to, we got boots on the ground. She's going to feed me some questions, I think, that might be coming out there from the public at large.
Well, we've got a great one, a good one from David here. He's asking a maintenance question.
Okay.
He's asking, how often should I change strings? And then how about using string cleaner?
All right. I like those. You want to take this answer off the air, Kelly? I'll move you off the screen. Thank you. Kelly there, she's bringing the question power. David wanted to know how often to change strings, and what about string cleaner? Those are good questions. First one I like because it's easy to answer. More often than you think is probably the best answer I have for you. I find that banjos, especially, I play a variety of string instruments, so I tend to play regularly guitar, banjo, fiddle, mandolin. Those are my four main instruments, and I play in a lot of configurations generally, so if I'm doing a solo show, playing in bands, duets, whatever, I tend to cycle through all those instruments. And what I found is that I need to change my banjo strings the most frequently. But a short answer, I would say change them once a month, and that's a good place to start. You're going to find out after a while, after you get used to playing and you get used to the experience of changing them out and hearing the difference once you've freshened up your strings, you'll start to notice. It'll get easier to know when it's time to change them. Because there are some telltale signs, which will be, besides just dirt and buildup and corrosion, that'll be a very clear sign. Before that usually happens, you'll start to get, um, they'll start to lose their ability to stay in tune. They'll start to become dull in tone. And even if you like a duller tone, if you're getting that dull tone because your strings are dead, you're going to also be dealing with intonation and issues and it going out of tune and whatnot. So if you like a dull tone, I recommend you start experimenting with different types of string materials until you find one that, when brand new, still sounds pleasantly dull to you. So if you change them out just once a month, then you'll be good to go. And then down the line, you'll start to really get a feel for when exactly it needs to happen, which might be more often than that. When I was touring pretty heavily with an old time string band, I was playing the fiddle in that band, but our banjo player, he would often change his strings twice a week. And there were weekends, festival weekends, where I saw him change them 4 or 5 times in about 3 or 4 days. so, so it's all relative. Change them once a month, you'll be good to go. As far as string cleaner, that's all fine. I don't have a lot of opinion or even good viable insight on that. Most string cleaners on the market are, I'd say the one thing to pay attention to is make sure it's not something that people are saying might be damaging to your fretboard. But most string cleaners on the market are kind of already prepped for that. So if you're not damaging your fretboard with it, you can get a little more life out of a string by cleaning them. I've used some commercial string cleaners and I've tried other methods along the way. So, for instance, if I was on the road and I was too busy and I'm going from gig to gig, town to town, just don't have time to change my strings, but they really need it, I might just scrub my strings down, get a rag, and just scrub them down. You could use, I think people use mineral oil. If not, that'll at least oil your fingerboard, and that'll be helpful. So that's my advice there. I'd change them once a month, and down the road you'll get more attuned to exactly when you want to change them. But that'll keep you fresh and sounding like a sparkly pro. And then feel free to experiment with those cleaners. I know some people who like them just because they can add a bit of lubrication to the strings and allow you to slide around. I don't feel that's really something I desire to have, is that slipperiness at all. But hopefully that helps, Dave. And let's see what else we got. Let's bring Kelly back in. Kelly, welcome back to the Play Better Banjo Live question show. Uh-oh. I don't hear you, but maybe that's just me. That's probably your mic as well. Well, technical issues. Huh. Well, I apologize for those of you out there if you can hear and I can't, but I will try it again. Let's see. You got a different mic set up there, Cal? Well, I'll tell you what. I might go to a pre-done question, and we'll try to get that worked out, and then we'll get Kelly back on here once we troubleshoot there. So let's see. Somebody else was asking, do I need to know chords to play clawhammer banjo? And this is kind of like the scale question in some ways. technically know. I do know some players who learned in a pretty old time traditional style, and they don't really use chords. These players I'm thinking of, I can't say they don't know chords. I would say they choose not to use them in any kind of intentional way. Um, it's kind of like the scales where I think you're it's a little different from the scales where I think you're way better off knowing chords than not knowing chords. And there's a little bit of a split in the clawhammer world from folks I've talked to, but I'd say most experienced clawhammer players fall over on the uh, chords are helpful side of things. I think they're super helpful for one if you're in a jam and you're unable to just pick up a melody right away or whatnot. It could be really helpful to just pick up the chords if you're in a tune jam, right? Just pick up the chords, and that'll give you a lot of what you need to uh, to get some viable sounds going. Sound like you know what you're doing. Also, if you're following along with a song as opposed to a fiddle tune, it can often be way more tasteful to just kind of be following the chord progression and not noodling around with a bunch of banjo-y sounds. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of good reasons to know your chords. I also use chords for improvisation, and so that includes just adding embellishments and variations to fiddle tunes and stuff like that. I'll use chord shapes and I'll use partial chord shapes and move them up and down the neck to give me different voicings, and that's all super super helpful. So I'm a big fan of knowing your chords, and then when you get to know your when you get to know your tunes pretty well, you start to associate certain groupings of notes with chords and chord shapes. So you start to understand, like, if I'm playing this particular tune here and I play this little passage, that's like a C chord idea, and that's a G chord idea. So you start to associate bits of melody with potential chord harmonies. And for me personally, I think that is very beneficial. So I would recommend uh, getting to know your chords on the clawhammer banjo. And that's where I start people if they start from scratch. I teach them that basic strum, what I call boom chicka. I teach them that and get that going. And then the first thing we do once that's happening is we start learning our basic chords and open G tuning, and then trying to play that strum and change chords at the same time. Once you can do that, you can start singing songs or playing along with people who are singing songs. So I would say yes, chords are important. Don't ignore them. Most people ask that question in the beginning because they don't like the demand it seems to be putting on their fingers. All the contortions, etc., seem to be maybe a little overwhelming in the beginning. So people start looking for ways out. I'm gonna see if I can invite Kelly back in here. Maybe we'll get that to work out this time around. And thank you all for joining up on this one. Hold on one sec.
What kind of strings do you use?
Okay, you can go try to get back on. All right. I got a question. What kind of strings do I use? We did that one manually. I've got a lot of info on this just tucked away in my email because this is a really common question I get a lot as people ask me about this banjo. This is a Brooks banjo, brooksbanjos.com. Brooks Maston makes these in Portland, Oregon. I know that's not the question, but that's my most common question ever asked. And people want to know less about learning to play the banjo than they want to know about this banjo. What kind of strings do I use? Right now, in the current phase I'm in, this is the easy answer. I've just been using a standard set of strings. These are medium gauge D'Addario nickel strings. I've actually got a video here on this YouTube channel that answers that question. And it has the product number. I think it's like J71 or something. It's a really standard set of D'Addario nickel plated banjo strings. So that's a pretty standard go. It's a medium gauge, and that's pretty conventional for clawhammer. Most people like a little heftier gauge for their clawhammer playing. So that's the easy answer. What I do sometimes, what I have done for most of the last decade or so, decade and a half, until very recently, is I do like a lot of tension on my strings, and I like a little more than even a medium gauge set gives me on a banjo like this. This has a slightly smaller scale length than some banjos. Not super small, but slightly smaller, which can make for a little less string tension. So one thing I do is I use banjo or guitar strings rather, and I'll use for a reference that standard D'Addario medium gauge nickel plated set. I'll look at those gauges and I'll notch each string up one little notch. So like I believe the first string on the D'Addario set is I think that's a 10 maybe. I'll notch it up to 11. It might be 11 on the medium gauge. I think I might notch it up to 12. But anyway, so you just look at, if you pull out that D'Addario set, look at every gauge, just add one digit to the end there, just notch it up one numeral, and do that across the board. And then on my fourth string, I notch it up even more. I think I was using maybe like a 24 last time. I like to use a wound guitar string. Usually it's like something that would be a G string on a guitar. I like to use for that. So that's a custom set that I often do. I haven't done it lately because it's just less convenient to order them all. Because to do that a lot, you have to order those strings individually. So I'll order them in bulk, and I'll order 10 or 20 of each string. Individual sets of 10 or 20 of each string, and then I'll carry those around and use those to string my banjo up. When I do that, it's interesting when you look at my tailpiece right now. This is one of it's kind of like a no knot style. Pretty standard there to have some little nodules there that you could wrap a loop end around. I think you can see that pretty well there. What I do when I use guitar strings, because they have ball end on them generally, is I'll come in, they'll just go in the same way, but I don't even use this end. There's no loop. I just go straight in until the ball stops. The ball ends will stop right here, if you can see that. I think I can give you a little better view there. So you see the loop end, standard loop end, but when I do regular guitar string, I go through there and the ball ends just stop right there. So that's a little difference, but it doesn't really change the tone much. Interesting thing about that, for one disclaimer there. If you're going to use gauges that are thicker than a medium gauge banjo set, you could be putting undue tension on your instrument. That could be causing issues, including like pulling the neck in an undue way and causing warpage and stuff like that. So if you don't have a strong neck or a proper system there set up and all that, you could be potentially long term adding some damage to your banjo, especially if you have an inexpensive banjo or just a banjo that has a more flexible, not so hard and thick neck. So you would want to consult with the maker of your instrument or the manufacturer of your instrument, or just take that risk into your own hands, which is what I generally do. But this is a good thick baseball bat of a neck, walnut, and it has been fine for about 12 years. I've been using those strings. Now, right now I have a lighter gauge on there, and I've been experimenting for the last half year or so with just using some. These are medium gauge, but it's light for me. Just using some standard and lighter gauge strings that I normally do. I think I'm about to go back to those guitar strings. I thought for the longest time that that was just something that I did, and I didn't know if anybody else did that, but I did have the pleasure of finding out that Richie Stearns does that as well. If you're familiar with him, he's amazing banjo, living banjo legend. He's great, great player, and he turns out also uses guitar strings on his banjo, and about the same kind of gauges that I do. So a little inside info there. Hopefully that's good, helpful answer to your question there. See what else we got. Let's see. Some of these I'm looking at I've already answered here on the channel, so I don't want to do that. Don't want to give you redundant information. Somebody's asking what's the best cheap banjo. This is another question I got ahead of time, so I don't know if we have any live stuff going right now. What's the best cheap banjo? I do get that question a lot too. So the best cheap banjo is when it's somebody else's banjo. You don't want a cheap banjo. That's my honest answer. But of course, you know, I don't want to discourage anybody from getting into the banjo game just because they don't want to spend a bunch of money on a brand new banjo when they're early in the experience. So, this day and age, luckily there are a lot of cheap options. Most of them are made from cheap materials and manufactured cheaply, so there are some expected issues there with quality of materials, quality of workmanship, and quality control. You get a lot of inconsistencies with some of these inexpensive banjos, and also, of course, it's relative. Price is certainly relative. So some people might want, might think that $200 is an expensive banjo, and somebody else might think that $3,400 is an expensive banjo. It's all relative. But I would say to get in on the banjo near the ground level, but have a really solid banjo that you could play for forever, you want to jump in around the $500 mark. That could be a lot of money for a lot of people a lot of times. So oftentimes you do want to find a less expensive solution. When people corner me and they really want to know what I recommend there, I would say I usually recommend you look for like a Deering Good Time and you find a used one somewhere online and see if you can snag one for a really good price. Because when they're new, they're right around 500, maybe 480. And so Deering is a good company for coming in at that 500 range and above. And if you can find any of their stuff used for less, I would recommend that. And that's what a lot of my early students do when I recommend that. And when they pull it off, it's always a good deal. I did have somebody just a year ago. I told him, it might be hard to find one in the range you're looking at, but give it a shot. And he found one in a couple hours for $150, normally a $500 banjo. Found one used. That's my first suggestion. Failing that, I'd recommend the Recording King brand and the Gold Tone also. Gold Tone makes a very wide range of banjos as far as pricing and quality of build. So obviously when you get down in their $200 range, you're just working with what you got, But they can function fairly well, those two brands, in that range. So that would be the cheap banjo recommendation from me. But honestly, if you can work your way around that, then do so. Now, most of the instruments I learned on were pretty cheap. Oh, one other thing I should say is my main banjo, the banjo I learned on, and then the only banjo I played for about the first 15, 20 years of my banjo life was a homemade kit. The company, now I believe the company is Saga, Saga, and they sell kits for various folky instruments. And you can still get basically the kit I had and they're pretty cheap. They're under 300 for sure, and you basically just put them together. And then the one we had, my father actually put together, and he just kind of just oiled the neck and fretboard. He oiled the neck with lemon oil a lot until it was all seasoned and ready to go, and then voila, had a cheap banjo that was great. That's another option, is to just get a kit that you can put together. But you can be creative too. Get online, look around, see if there's some makers making some interesting cheap stuff for you. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to see in a second if there are any more questions coming in. I do want to mention, if you're not already aware, so I did recently the Better Banjo Way workshop series. It was a free series of 4 workshops. It was a 3-part series. We did an extra bonus workshop. Talked a lot of mental game stuff in that series, about kind of some philosophies, and starting to work on the mental conditioning aspect of music. Because when you're trying to become an accomplished musician, you're really not just developing muscle strength and dexterity and coordination, you're also building mental muscle, so to speak. So there's mental conditioning, physical conditioning, and then there's another mind component, this kind of, I just call the integrative element. There's 3 elements there that you got to work on. You got to get all your musical knowledge built up, got to get your strength and dexterity built up, and you got to get your mental state, your mindset, and your mental functioning built up as far as it is related to music. So this workshop series focused a lot on the mental side, and then also just on the logistical side of like setting intentional musical goals and then turning that into an intentional practice habits. In our final session of that series, we got together in a Zoom group and solved some musical problems together. Everybody kind of learned from each other, and then we did a jam at the end. So that's something that I'm doing a whole lot more here in the future. So from the workshop series, we've gone into the official Better Banjo Way sign up. So that's something you can check out. I don't think I have. Oh yeah, the link is in the description down here. And if you click on that, it'll take you to the page to give you all the information, and that's open for enrollment for about 5 more days. If you get in on that, what we're going to be doing is 3 weekly live sessions. So there'll be a session like this once a week. There'll be a session where I guide a jam session once a week. So you'll be watching me here. I'll be running you through tunes and songs, and you'll be able to just play along at home. There'll be a lot of folks playing along at home. And we'll do that in a variety of capacities. Some of them will be live casts like this. Others will be in a Zoom meeting so we can actually see each other and talk in between songs and whatnot. We're doing a bunch of stuff. I'm doing a live brand new lesson every week, doing clawhammer, 2-finger, 3-finger, music theory, jamming, improv. All those subjects are going to be covered. So for the next year, we'll be doing all that, and then we'll have a monthly get-together as well, and some bonus stuff, and some quarterly 1-day online banjo intensive. So basically, it's just a big blast of banjo. And so besides all the courses and lessons and all that stuff that's also available on my website, that all comes with the Better Banjo Way package, and then you get all this live access to all this live stuff. Some of you I notice are here already. You're already in. So we'll be getting to all that pretty shortly, in about 8 days or so. So if you're interested in that link down below will get you there. Do we have more questions? This is one I get all the time on YouTube, and I have a list here of stuff people pre-sent, but I also grabbed a couple common questions that I just get in general all the time. And this one I get on YouTube all the time is, when is the next 5-string mess around episode coming out? And it's coming out as soon as I can get it out for y'all. As you know, if you're a regular here on my YouTube channel, there are spurts of videos going up, and then sometimes got to keep the lights on doing other things, you know. So this is kind of a passion project over here. And those 5-string mess around vids are so much fun, and I really appreciate those of you who enjoy those and are always requesting more of them. And I always tell you when you ask, I have probably another 8 or 9 of those already recorded. Just a matter of finding the time to edit them and get them out for you. So that is on the list. I'll be trying to do that soon. The nice thing is, even if that doesn't happen super soon, I'll be doing more of these live things every once in a while, probably about once a month. They'll just pop up and show up. But then also, starting sometime in September, there will be, I'm going to start doing a regular, probably on Mondays, you'll get a regular video here. It'll be similar to 5-string mess around in the sense that it won't just be a straight banjo lesson. It's basically going to be a banjo show, banjo here and now. So that's coming in a few weeks. So you'll be starting to see more regular, you'll at least get a weekly touch in there. And that'll be a fun thing because we're going to talk everything banjo related on that show. Sometimes we'll do it live, sometimes it'll be pre-recorded, sometimes there'll be a guest, sometimes I'll just be talking at you like I'm doing right now, just pontificating on banjo stuff. So there is more coming down the pike. There are plenty more 5-string mess around episodes, but they are by far the most labor intensive thing that I have to offer. So they're happening. I guess just keep bothering me, and eventually I'll feel enough guilt and obligation, and I'll just start putting them out for you. All right. So I'm going to do a final call here for any final questions, and I'll probably wrap up here in the next 5 minutes or so. And we will see. Last call, folks. Oh, I will say, one thing that's going to happen here, I don't want to make promises I can't keep, but I'll say it's going to happen here sometime in the next 5 to 8 days, let's say. I'm going to get on here on an impromptu setup like this and teach you Old Dan Tucker, because that's another major request I've gotten here through the YouTube channel. So I've got that video up of me doing Old Dan Tucker, but no instruction for y'all. So I am going to do that one. I'll do it live, but of course it'll stay up here for you to check out. So actually, I might just play that for you as a send-off, and then, unless there's a last-minute question, that'll be it. And then I'll move on until we get together again next time. This was my grandmother's favorite song. So when I started playing the banjo as a teenager in the late 80s, that was not very hip at the time. Not in my community, but my grandma thought I was cool because I could play this song, Old Dan Tucker, that she knew from her childhood in North Carolina. Old Dan Tucker's a nice old man, washed his face with a frying pan, combed his hair with a wagon wheel, died with a toothache in his heel. Now get out the way for old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. Get out the way for old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. on riding, the Billy Goat and leading the hound, and first to the right and then to the left and then to the girl that he loved the best. And get out the way for old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. Get out the way for old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. Old Dan Tucker, he got drunk, fell in the fire, and he kicked up a chunk. A red hot coal got in his shoe. Oh my Lord, how the ashes flew. And get out the way for old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. And get out the way for old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. Yeah, little old Dan Tucker. Y'all are not too late for your supper. You showed up when you heard the dinner bell. Hopefully that helped answering some of your questions there. And it's good to see some familiar names there in the chat. And we'll be doing a bunch more, having more fun with this stuff. Like I said, I got more stuff coming up here on YouTube. And if you want a whole lot of live stuff for the next year or more, check out that link right down here in the description and check out the Better Banjo Way.